What is shaking?
Are there angels watching this right now?
Yeah, of course.
Are they cracking up?
Yeah, they're having a blast.
You can't escape the pull of the golden mic, sister.
I'm hiding my
Did you get any
authenticity.
of the nasty weather that went through the midsection?
Look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself your story matters.
Did you get any of the
This is
nasty
my
weather
place.
that
My
came
place
through
is
like
to
Tennessee and
highlight
stuff? Did that hit
amazing
you guys at all?
freaking people.
I'm gonna do a shimmy.
What is shaking?
What is shaking, everybody? Dude, that's my line. I want you to smash it, Trisha Brooke.
Channeling you today.
Oh my God!
Oh, and she's like, I'm going through menopause.
I love this show. I love this show. You understand me? I'm so excited that my folks are not watching this show right now because they totally get on my case to go back to school and finish my med school degree. The Golden Mike Live! Did you think that I was gonna change Lobster Bird? I want you to crumple up your notes in front of you. Now we're gonna go and deviate from the script. What is shaken? Episode 215, Golden Mike, or 214, Golden Mike Live, because there will be a 215, with your boy, Mark Cordone. I've been away for a while, doing some cool things. I can't wait for you guys to hear about them. And it took some leadership for me to get those things executed. And I made leadership so hard. It was so difficult. Which is why we have leadership coach, someone who's been in the game of HR for a long, long time. The very wonderful, the very beautiful Paula Roundbuehler. Big round of applause for Paula Roundbuehler today. Paula, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Mark. How about you?
Oh, I'm living the dream, sister. I'm living the dream. It's always good to see you, Paula.
It's good to see you, too.
What's always funny is usually when we meet around these circumstances where, like, the background is like a women's room and stuff. And it's like people are coming and going and they've got toilet paper in their hands and stuff like that. But not today, not on the big budget show.
Nope.
We've got backgrounds and microphones today for everybody. And we're talking about leadership and like this idea that leadership doesn't have to be as hard as everybody makes it out to be. We don't have to read those 50,000 books to be a good leader. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Mark Cordone. I am a positive psychology coach, founder of the Joy Revolution, which launches on March 12th. Next cohort, you're going to want to get on that. But more importantly, what I get to do on a regular basis is ask two questions. And those two questions are simply this. How happy are you today? And how much are you living in your full purpose? Paula, how happy are you today? And how much are you living in your full purpose?
I'm really happy today. Just a lot of things are happening, and I'm able to work in my areas of strengths more and more. Mm-hmm. And while things might be a little bit uncertain, it's a forward progress. Mm-hmm. And that just feels really good after kind of having been walking through the mud. And how much am I living in purpose? I would have to say 100%. Meant to do this, and I should have done it earlier. But just really excited about what the future holds and really being able to make a difference.
So before this, you were in HR, and I want to go even further back. I want to talk about baby Paula, little Paula. Little Paula, I believe you moved around a lot, too, when you were little, right?
I did.
Yeah.
Not so much when I was little, but as a teenager.
Okay.
Had some experiences, yeah.
So you were the new school, you were the new girl in the class every now and then. And also at the same time, you came in and you had these experiences as a child, wonderment, awe, all those sort of things. What were the things that you remember? What were your first memories in terms of career and leadership when you were younger?
Well, I've always been drawn to helping people. Mm-hmm. I was the person that people would come and talk to about, whatever concerns they had, that type of stuff. So I always knew that I was a good listener, and people came to me to just kind of get help. And even early on, knew I would do something in the psychology realm of it, taking classes in high school, and that's actually where my bachelor's is. But it was really the ability to adjust and adapt to different environments and see them as different, not good or bad, and just really absorb what was going on around me as a way to be curious and to learn. So trying eating rattlesnake when we lived in Texas, it's like, they do rattlesnake hunts and you're like, you got to try it.
And the verdict?
Tastes like chicken, a lot more ribs.
Amazing. I think it's what else is pretty amazing is sort of this idea of being able to move around and be very open to it. I know a lot of kids who are still feeling, or a lot of adults who still feel that new kid in the class syndrome, where it's almost like one of these things is not like the other and I fit out or don't fit in with the rest of the crew. That wasn't you. That wasn't your experience.
Being the new kid in the school for, I think it was almost 4 years running, you learn who you are and how to insert yourself, but you really learn how to adjust. And while it was difficult, and especially as I think I was 12 or 13, those are pretty formative years. So it wasn't easy. I'll never say that it was easy, but it really set me up to move around when I was an adult because I knew I wasn't going to die. I knew planes fly both ways. I knew I could always come home. And so it was like, I can do it. It wasn't easy going into new cities where you knew nobody, trying to find housing and work and that kind of stuff. But I gained so much from those experiences that I have good friends from every location that I've worked at that I can count on around the world. And you can't always do that when you stay in the same place.
Just a totally off question. Are you an empath?
Probably, I would probably say more empathic than not.
Yeah.
I don't feel everybody's emotions, but I can cue in on them pretty easily.
Okay, right on. And was it more of those skills that pulled you into HR, or was it just the psych background and you're like, I love how organizations work and I love being able to work with people?
I never thought of myself of going into HR. It never was even on my radar screen. After bachelor's, planned on going to master's, but like, I want to work for a few years, get some money up because I was paying for it myself. And I got a job as a personnel clerk. That's how old it was. And it just came very natural to me. It was very logical. And I just took to it really well and stayed with it. Same as I never dreamed of working in the hotel industry, but I joined it a few years after starting in HR, and it just felt so good to be in that kind of environment that I spent 30 years in it.
What about the hotel industry was so alluring and was so comforting to you?
You can't not be nice and work in the hospitality. So, there's if you're mean, you just don't last. And you also work in some really pretty places. The HR office oftentimes was next to the dumpster and in the basement. Our offices weren't, corner offices. But you worked in a place that the whole goal was to take care of others.
Sure.
And regardless if you're the dishwasher or you're the front desk agent, they all had an impact on that ultimate service. And it was just having everybody focused on that was a really nice environment to work in.
What was the biggest thing that you learned from being in HR over the 30 years that you were there?
The importance of relationships in the workplace and making sure that everybody knew that they played a role and an important role, and making the time for them and really connecting with them as individuals. Because I think one hotel, there was a housekeeper there that was there for 44 years.
Okay.
And that just amazed me. But you could sit down and get to know her, and that's just what she was passionate about. She really took ownership of her rooms, and it was a source of pride for her. That it was really kind of neat to get to know those people.
So you weren't like Toby from The Office, like always. always left out.
No.
Michael Scott would pick on you.
No. No.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to move over to this idea of leadership because,
Mm-hmm.
at what point were you like, oh, this is a leadership skill that we're talking about now. These relationships are based on leadership. First and foremost, how do you define leadership?
Leadership is really somebody who influences another.
Okay.
And that could be influencing yourself. It could be influencing other people. But we all influence each other, whether that's what to have for dinner tonight or it's what are you going to do in your job today. So leadership isn't a title, and it's not necessarily something that you have to earn or take classes for. A lot of it, I think, is a choice. Mm-hmm. Do I want to be a leader?
Yeah.
And then the question is, how do I want to be, or who am I as a leader? What's my persona?
Now, at what point in your life did you have that choice? Do I want to be a leader, and then putting on the persona of one?
Oh, I think when I was moving around as a kid, I had to lead myself.
Yeah.
Because, especially with like 7th, 8th grade, people already have their friends and network established. So breaking into that wasn't necessarily easy. So I had to figure it out on my own and insert myself. And so leading myself definitely at that age, because you had to, otherwise, yeah, you'd just be sitting in the back of the room and not having a whole lot of fun.
Exactly. And this whole idea of leadership now, and I mean, it goes back to when I was in college too. Like that, it was something that was difficult. It was an assumption that there's a small group of people who do it well. They've got a certain style. It's almost the charismatic leadership model, and those are the leaders, right?
Right.
So you're talking today about leadership not having to be hard. It can be hard, I guess, if we make it hard. And I guess that's the first question. Why do we make it so damn hard?
I think part of it is that what we're taught it takes to be a leader is some of those more administrative things of how to schedule, how to order things, how to write a performance review. And they touch on motivating others, but they don't really follow up with how important that is and how do you actually do it. And that's what I think makes it so difficult, because that's the whole influence thing.
Sure.
So they're managing.
That doesn't feel like leadership. It feels like management or administration, which has leadership assumed in it, but you can suck at leadership and do a performance report,
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. And I think the leader piece also, in order for you to be a leader, you need to have a really solid relationship with the people you lead. And even the informal people, not necessarily people it's not just people that report to you, but the people that you interact with throughout the organization. Because if you don't have that relationship, then it really is just what we would call order takers or order givers.
Okay.
And you're doing what you're told, and it's kind of robotic. You're not really motivating anybody. You really don't have a team then. You have a bunch of individuals that are just doing their job.
Okay.
And that's probably one of the biggest frustrations of people who think they're leaders, is that they have a bunch of people who just do their job and say things like, well, that's not my job description, or that's not my job. That's, John's job, that kind of stuff. And they don't understand that if they take the time with that individual, they literally will move heaven and earth for somebody that they like and trust and respect.
So when, you're talking about people who going out of their way for each other. I've also heard the term, well, I'm just staying in my lane. That's the best me that I can be. What is your take on that? Are those two different things, or are those two complementary things?
I think they're complementary, because first, I think you need to be able to put people where they do their best work, thus their lane. Mm-hmm. But then if you're able to do that and be really crystal clear and acknowledge and recognize and appreciate their strengths or their talents, then that person feels good and like, okay, well, now it's okay for me. I want to go outside my lane because I want to help my leader because I like them.
Sure.
And I respect them. And I want to make them happy. So I think it's more complimentary than it is anything else.
Because it does seem as if it's like, oh, you're going outside your lane here, blah, 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 blah. Or here it's like, you're playing too myopic here. You know, you're staying too far in your lane. Like, it may blur a little bit more than we think it does, right? I wanted to ask you about this too, and this idea of leadership and the idea of power versus force. I know we've talked about it in the past, but also at the same time, like, which one is leadership and which one is not, or are both leadership because your definition is influence?
Power is more associated with leadership. Force comes in when you need to have an authoritative leadership style. There's a fire in the building, and I need to tell you with force to get out of the building.
Gotcha.
Okay. Power is where you'd prefer to use it. Because that fire alarm, people know what to do because you've already trained them. You don't need to tell them to get out of the building. They know exactly what to do because you've done the fire drills. And they want to get out safely, and they want to see you on the outside too. But I think it's when you don't have those relationships that leaders use the force, because that's the only tool that they have that they know will get results. Right.
You know, it's almost as if I don't have any. I can't resort to anything else to save your life except to be very directive right now.
Right. I know if I raise my voice, I'm going to get your attention. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? But the challenge, or I think the opportunity, is to help leaders understand that there's a whole spectrum of volumes to use before you get to that. Okay. I mean, ultimately, somebody needs to follow your instructions, and if they don't, that's a performance disciplinary type of thing. But there's a million ways to do it before you get to that point where it's easier on everybody.
Talk about some of the spectrum of volumes.
Well, on the other side is somebody who hides under a basket, and they don't lead at all. Okay. They think, you know your job, you've read the job description, you know the policy, I trust you to do it, but they don't monitor it, they don't acknowledge, they don't recognize performance and those types of things. But then you start to say, okay, well, let's sit down and let's do some training and some encouraging, and let's work through that. Let's do some stretch goals to help somebody grow beyond a little bit more if they do want to be a leader, if they want to try other positions, those types of things. But I think the really rich part is where you can have a conversation about all different things, pleasant things, challenging things, but you never raise your voice. You never are that person who raises their voice by lowers their voice, where you could hear the force in their voice, even though they're not raising it, gritting their teeth. That's going to be more on that force side. But when you can sit down and actually have a conversation that's civil, that's purposeful, that builds the relationship, even if it is a difficult conversation, that's where that leadership really is strong. And you build the relationship because you have a trust level there.
Sure.
Sure.
So I'm still interested. Like a couple of so you told me what force was, force was not, and this could be turning into those, like leadership styles or something like that. But what are some specific ways that you can make leadership easier?
It comes down to knowing your team members and sitting down and just having not always work-related conversation. Get to know them as a person. Get to know, what's important to them inside of work and outside of work with no consequences. There's no hidden agenda. It's not like I'm using this as a lead in because I need to have you clean out the grease trap,
Yeah.
but I'm going to warm you up. That praise sandwich never works.
Yeah.
That type of thing. And then when you have that basis of trust, then when you do ask somebody to extend past their comfort zone, they're like, okay, yeah, I can do it. I feel confident. I know that you're not pushing me over the edge. You're bringing me to the ledge, but you're not pushing me over it. And I also know that if you need to talk to me about something more difficult, I've got that basis of trust. And you're doing it because A, you need to, because it's a performance matter, but B, you want to help me not do that again.
So really, it's starting with getting to know the relationships, getting to know the individuals that are a part of the organization. That's where leadership starts. It doesn't start with barking orders or, I'm going to turn this around in 90 days without even getting to know who's the ones that are going to turn it around. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's funny is how many people, when I worked in an organization, how many people didn't do that? I think the vice presidents or the new presidents would do that. They'd spend their first 90 days just getting coffee with people. But then the other piece is like people would just go right in and start clearing the house and stuff like that without even knowing people.
Right. Yeah, they come in and they start making changes without even asking questions of how has this been working? Do we even need to change it?
Yeah.
And I also think there's a fair amount of fear in workplace culture now of I shouldn't know about whether somebody has children because maybe they're going to accuse me of discrimination later on.
Yeah.
And so it's become a really sterile workplace.
Sure.
That people won't even say, oh, wow, you got a haircut yesterday. It looks nice. They won't even do that because they're fearing that somebody's going to say that they were sexually harassing them, which makes for a really sterile workplace.
Absolutely. And well, I think I have a double-barreled question here. And the first question is, how do you navigate through that as a leader? And then number two is, how do you create a culture of trust and care in which people actually know that they're curious. It's not a point of discrimination. It's something different.
Yeah, and that is going to go to building a basis of trust, and that is a slowly peeling of that onion so that they get to know you as a leader and you get to know them truly as a whole human being and not just as a worker. And knowing what's important to them.
Yeah. And
knowing what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. I had gone to a meeting at a local business here, and they had done this really unique concept for unconscious bias, where they had little rooms for each primary area. And one of the gentlemen on the panel was Hispanic, and he referenced talking to a different employee. It was around Thanksgiving time, and they were talking about meals and side dishes and, that kind of stuff. And then this guy had gone through that, the rooms for the unconscious bias and stuff. And he came back to that gentleman. He said, "Oh my God, I hope I didn't offend you asking you about the food that you eat, for Thanksgiving. Maybe it wasn't mashed potatoes and stuffing and turkey, and maybe it was, some other thing that they use culturally." And he said, "No, not at all. I wasn't offended. We were talking food. I'm a foodie, but it takes that awareness to say, this might be perceived differently from the person across the table from me at lunch. I need to be mindful of that, but not be so sterile that I'm not even going to talk about food with somebody who's a foodie. Come with curiosity. What is important in your family?"
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like it is a two-way, a double-edged sword right now, because it's like, we promote this kind of culture, but also at the same time, like, we see how people are kind of biting their tongues right now, being like, I don't want my intention to be misinterpreted as. And also at the same time, it's pretty damn tiring to say, I don't mean this to be racist, but I'm just curious. You know, like it kind of pops the bubble when someone does that, right?
Yeah, because they know it's probably crossing the line.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely, absolutely.
You know, and it's like, okay, if you have to say that, then maybe rethink your question. And even just, I mean, curiosity, it invites the other person to share a little bit about their world. And
Yeah.
when you're interested in me as a person, I mean, everybody's favorite topic is themselves, right?
Of course.
And if you ask me about my history, that kind of stuff, I'll be more than happy to share it. But don't judge it. Don't criticize it. Don't talk over. Don't tell me, oh, well, when that happened to me, this is what, because now you just shut me down. Now you're not curious. You're looking for a way to start the conversation about you. So, okay,
Absolutely, absolutely.
then I'm not going to share with you anymore because you're not really genuinely listening to me.
That makes total sense. What about this idea of legacy? You're coming in for a short period of time, you know, and then a lot of people talk or think about what their legacy on the world is going to be, regardless of the environment. What is your take on leadership and legacy?
Everybody has a legacy. It's whether it's the legacy that you want to have or not. So I was reading just this morning, Jack Welch's. There was an article about Jack Welch and the results that he was able to gain, but also some of the things that maybe were seen as a little bit harsh. And so his legacy is a little bit mixed. You know, he produced some great financial results for companies, but there was also a lot of wake behind him of people losing jobs and people not understanding how that happened. So whether that was his legacy of choice or not, I don't know. But I think as you go about your day to day, is this consistent with my values, with who I am genuinely as a person? And is that representing the leadership image that I want to have? And thinking about, okay, what's my next best step here? How do I enter into this new role? How do I enter into this conversation? How do I establish myself so that I am that leader that people talk about for years? Because I've been in organizations like that the leader had retired, but, you know, that person, he or she, had such a legacy. And it went positive and negative. You know, there's people that, you know, they've got a dirt trail behind them. And there's other people with nice green and everybody's looking at that.
It's the what would Jesus do bracelets.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You know, and it's for the leader coming in to replace them. That's really hard
Absolutely.
to establish themselves when they're always measured to somebody else.
Yeah.
So I want leaders to be measured against themselves because everybody's held to the same standard. Leaders are watched more.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
you know, is I want you to be you and I want you to be the best you. So how do we talk about that within the concept of leadership outside of the job description? Because the job description really doesn't describe leadership, it describes management. But how are you going to be consistent with our culture? How are you going to foster people who want to work for you, not have to work for you? I was at a talk this morning and somebody said 75% of people in the US hate their jobs. And 77% of companies say that they have a leadership gap. And 70% of engagement shifts on a leader. So a leader has a 70% influence on how a team member feels about engagement. Those are really high numbers.
That's pretty epic. That's pretty epic.
Yeah.
And you know, as you talk about this as well, Paula, I don't know if this is not the right term, but it's almost like it's not self-leadership, but almost being like in integrity with the values that the leader that you want to be. I don't know if that makes
Right.
any sense. And sort of using that to lead your way. Does that jive with you? Like, does that jive with you as a...
Yeah, because I've done a lot of work in strengths or talents,
Yeah.
and you talk about it just comes naturally to you. But if I try to do something that's more on the weakness side or the soft side, it's like I'm wearing somebody else's shoes. I'll be able to walk, but it's going to be awkward. They're either going to be too tight and you're going to see I'm in pain, or they're going to be too loose and I'm going to step out of them. But it's like I'm wearing somebody else's clothes, and I will look uncomfortable, and thus I'm not being my authentic self. So the trick is to take a look at, what makes you you, and okay, how do we use that to amplify your leadership?
That's pretty amazing. I think that goes pretty well with your 6-week program you've got coming up.
It is all about,
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about it because I do think it addresses those leaders that think it's either my way or the highway or underneath the basket as their choices. It helps them find their voice in a way that leads the other person as well to have a conversation, not a confrontation.
Okay.
Because, you lead with the energy that you bring into the room. And so if you say something like, Mark, I need to give you some feedback. Can you come to my office? Pit in the stomach. Holy crap. What did I do?
Yeah, I'm going to the principal's office again.
Yeah. It strikes fear.
Yeah.
But if you introduce it more along the lines of, hey, let's talk about that presentation that you did yesterday. I'd like to know what your experience was.
Yeah.
And most people I've found are pretty self-reflective, and they probably are going to identify those areas that you as a leader said this needs to be improved, and they might offer it up. So now you don't have a confrontation, do you?
No,
You've got somebody reaching out for help.
I would say that you've got someone supporting you and making you a better
Yeah.
performer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you this. We've talked about leadership being hard. Can you remember a time in your career in which you made leadership hard, and in retrospect, what could you have done now to make it so much easier?
I don't know that it was a specific thing, but I think the trend was I always felt like I needed to be right and that I needed to know everything all at once.
Yeah.
And be that upbeat, charismatic leader, regardless of the circumstances, good, bad, or indifferent. Mm-hmm. That you always had to be that positive, rah-rah person, when in reality it wasn't there. I think that made it more difficult because it was incongruent for other people. Because there's been times where I needed to lay people off, eliminate positions. And when you're rah, 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 and then people hear the next day that these 6 people aren't here any day, they look at you like, what are you, Jekyll and Hyde?
Yeah.
And it makes you look not emotionally intelligent. I hate those conversations. It's like I don't eat or sleep for a week before I have them because those decisions are made weeks, if not months ahead. And it's not something that you can share. But those are the conversations that I hate. And it's not that I'm not affected by it, but, the leader is expected to be, that charismatic. They're expected to be the leader. And I think in those times I needed to find the right people that I could be vulnerable with without compromising confidentiality, which is hard as an HR person because in hotels, there's only 2 people. It's me and the GM. And it's like we're, treating each other's wounds.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always help when I need my wounds taken care of. So it's, those roles I think are a little bit different because there aren't many people that we can turn to in that role without breaking confidentiality.
Sure.
But I would say, it was, feeling like I needed to know everything, be everything, and hold the weight of the shoulders on me without knowing who I could go to for help.
Okay.
And sometimes that was just talking.
Okay.
Just, hey, I need to vent here, that type of stuff.
Okay. So there is a way that that it doesn't have to be on you, but you're not disengaged. You're still engaged, but it's almost like you're engaging others in the process, and that makes a good living, breathing, developing organization, good, bad, better, or, for the worst, So I think that's really interesting. And now outside of sort of the work that you do, how are you seeing leadership with grace and ease and joy coming into play in all domains of your life right now?
I'm much more calm and involved in all areas of my life. When it used to be kind of compartmentalized, because I was that career person that I gave everything to work. And then by the end of the day, I come home, I eat dinner. I would joke that I have the bedtime of an 8-year-old, just because you're just so tired and worn out. But learning to balance it and know what deserves your energy and what doesn't. So when to be a little bit detached and say, I don't need to carry that weight. I can put it down and compartmentalize, and making better choices for myself and my family, and remembering where the priorities were. I lived away from family for 18 years, so I missed a lot of stuff. And now I'm here, so I can be involved in it. And I don't regret living away and traveling all over the place, but I missed a lot of key things, that was happening with even the day-to-day stuff, the birthdays or the Sunday dinners, that now that I have that wisdom looking back, I really value the time I have right now with family and friends in my hometown. So.
Amazing. This has been long and coming. We've been waiting for this day that when Paula Raunbuehler would be on the Golden Mic, and look at the flow that we got in, Paula.
Yeah,
it was totally awesome, and I can't stop looking at the ring light reflection on your.
Oh, sorry.
It's people like you that I've had 214 episodes. I've had 214 episodes.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
It is a lot. I've had that many.
Standing room only, huh?
Standing room only, yeah. I've had that many because you cannot cancel me. So here's the part that we call the Golden Mic, Paula. I've been waiting so long to see you speak into this Golden Mic. A little visioning activity, if you will, and this Golden Mic is coming down from your ceiling right now. It's hanging right between you and that ring light of yours. And this Golden Mic has the power to translate into any language across the multiverse. You have the power to say whatever it is that you want into it. And for some people, they're not going to pick it up. For other people, they've been searching. They've been going from class to class to class their whole lives, waiting for this moment where you finally are going to bring them the respite, the reconciliation that they've been looking for. So, Paula, your Golden Mic is live now.
I want to invite you to step into yourself, get to know yourself, figure out, what you do best and what really lights you up, and then find ways to do more of that. We're all leaders of ourselves first. And it's not selfish to lead yourself. It's not selfish to put yourself first. They say you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to fill yourself up in order for you to give to other people. But it's when you're in that place where you're comfortable in your own skin and able to offer your best that you give your best to the world. If you're wearing somebody else's clothes, if you're following somebody else's guidelines to the strictest letter, and you're not able to express yourself, it's going to look awkward. You're going to leak out from space to space, and it's just going to get really messy. But if you can have the courage to find a way to be yourself within the organization that you're in, whatever that may be, so that you truly do look forward to going to work, you're going to have a better experience. Your colleagues are going to have a better experience. You're going to get better results. And you don't have to force yourself to do it. And when I've seen people see that vision of themselves, the look on their face is that peace and that joy. And it's just been such a wonderful experience to see them go out into the world and really maximize their results where they were restricted before and thinking, I have to walk in these steps and I have to follow these rules. When they realized those chains were gone, it was pretty fun to watch where their career went.
Paula, I want you to hold that golden mic out for a second. I want you to feel the weight of it. Yes, yes. Now smash that golden mic, Paula. Dance on it. Yoga on it. Do whatever you want. Do the badger on it. Oh, thank you so much, Paula. It's been an absolute blast having you on the show. Don't forget, 6 weeks. Ready, set, go, have conversations that matter. It started yesterday, so there might be a couple slots left. If you email Paula at PRAUEBEBUEHLER Rauenbuehler at gmail.com. You're gonna see that.
Yeah.
You're gonna see it in the show notes. We'll put it up there. All
right.
But Paula, thank you so much. It's been amazing to be a part of your life the past couple of years, and I can't wait to see where we both go next. So on behalf of Paula and myself, we're gonna shut the golden mic off. And what we ask you is this: if you're feeling good and you're living life to its fullest purpose, what is your responsibility to lead and change history for the better? All right, take care.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. I tried to just spell your last name.